Welcome back, everyone, to another BNI Earlybird podcast. This week, we have a very special treat for you. As you all may know, there were several data outages in the past month. So today, we have from our chapter Mr. Rajkumar. He runs a company called Point Solutions. He's the Jack Sparrow of our chapter, treating your data like a treasure and going to extreme measures to make sure that you and your firm are protected. Welcome, Raj, to the BNI Earlybird podcast.
Thank you so much, Vedant. Thanks for having me out here.
It's my pleasure. So please tell our viewers what you do and what is Point Solutions all about.
Great. Thank you so much once again. Point Solutions as a company, this is our proud 21 years in the running itself, where we ensure that not just the client understands what we do, but they try to create a relationship because they need to make sure that the data is so important these days in the current day and age, and their IT is run 24/7. And that's the reason we proudly say that our tagline is that we treat your IT and data like a treasure. That's exactly our core point, and people have respected for that. The clients come back to us, making sure that their IT is what they treat their IT as information technology and not income taxed.
So when you say treating people's data like a treasure, what would you describe that as? What are some of the processes?
It's from the perspective of a company. If you go to see that over the past 10, 12 years, there's been so much amount of data that people have accumulated out. They really do not have the time to manage that particular data. And what we try and do is that to ensure that whenever you're accumulating the data, and why we say it's like a treasure, because data is the next oil. The more you preserve the data in your archival format, it's far more easier for you to look back and say that this is exactly where my treasure lies. Because whether it is for statistical purposes, whether it is your business purposes, you do need your data all the time at any given point of time.
So when you say access to data is one of the biggest things, I myself am guilty of that. I am what they consider a data hoarder. For my company, Oxyfins, we have already generated about 1.5 TB of data in about 2 years. How can you help a company like mine, or how can you help other small to medium enterprises with their data solutions?
So if I have to go ahead and ask you that as you said, you've hoarded out 1.5 TB of the data, how much amount of time did it take you to accumulate that much amount of data?
That data actually accumulated pretty fast. It took me about 1.5 years to about 2 years, I would say.
And if I had to ask you a second question, when was the last time you sat and sorted your data out?
So we do sort a certain amount of data for financial analysis, but a lot of metrics that do not get used just get pushed to a backup server where it gets archived. We don't use that often, but it's a big mess. That's one of the main reasons we do not use it.
Correct. So that's exactly, I mean, partly you answered your own question that it's your data, so it's your responsibility to go ahead and archive it. Make sure it's available as a production data, which means that's data that you use live on a day-to-day basis for your analysis purposes. But then you do have a backup of a data. In case of any disaster happens, you can go ahead and at any given point of time, revert back in case if something goes wrong. And that's exactly why we say that when people accumulate the data, least that they realize is that when you're accumulating the data, it is extremely important for you to manage that particular data also. It's not about keeping on accumulating the data and then data will manage on its own. No, there are tools available, and that's where we are educating the companies to make sure that it's your data, it's your responsibility. Please take and be aware that look, it is your data and you need to take care of that particular data itself.
Great. Coming from a family business background myself, what we have is a lot of data, but what we do not have is a lot of backups and a lot of infrastructure for that data. For us, the data and IT cost is more like a tax, you can call it. It's a cost of doing business, which we do not feel we have to bear. I believe Point Solutions is changing that mindset in today's landscape in Dubai. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So today, as you said, that you know that you require a backup, but what we try and tell the companies or the individuals whenever you're accumulating the data, follow us three simple steps or three, two, and one. You should be having three sets of your backups on two separate medias and one offsite. So that is a simple policy. You can start off with possibly as low as 5,000 dirhams and making sure that whether your organization is small or big, you are falling into the framework to ensure that your data is available with you. Again, 3, 2, 1, three sets of data, two separate medias, and one offsite. It is as simple policy that you could try and reiterate those every time within once in a week, once in a month, once in 15 days, howsoever a policy that you would want to take it.
Right. So it's good to know that data services like this are cheap and easy to understand as well. This 321 tagline that you gave me has really stuck with me right now. So I would encourage all of our viewers to contact him for this 321 solution. So recently, with the whole worldwide outage of some systems, could you elaborate on that and what actually happened and how your company helped the users?
Yeah, so basically, again, we are not biased towards a product or a service. Our job is like an IT doctor. We basically try and you knock our door only when there is an issue. So what the way we analyze it, that look, it's not about what you did or what happened. Going forward, what are the steps that you go ahead and take in? So the way we have been managing the portfolio of different clients when it comes to the IT infrastructure part of it is that it is at the end of the day when the strike happens up, whether it's a ransomware attack or it's a crowd strike or whichever outage that happens up, it is a software driven activity. So how you go ahead and say that how do you want to go ahead and plug the loophole in the systems part of it? The best part is to do is to accumulate all the updates that your that our applications are giving in, the operating systems are giving in. Do not be in a rush to push those updates out to all your users. So there are methods available where you can accumulate all the updates from all the different applications in one central repository and then put it user by user, department by department, so that you know that in case if there's an outage, you're not having an outage on the whole of your organization.
That's a very insightful message that you're providing. Even in my organization, we do update as soon as we get an update. We were lucky enough not to be faced with the CrowdStrike issue, as you mentioned, but going forward, we will take this as one of the key points that we do in our organization as well. What would you recommend small to medium enterprises in terms of data security? Because they view it as a cost. So unless there is an actual event where we can prove that this cost has an actual benefit, like the whole CrowdStrike outage, we don't really think about this data. So what would you recommend to these organizations?
So again, as long as they have got their backups in place, they've got systems in place, they've got procedures in place and policies in place. Now, whenever for a smaller organization, which is an owner-driven organization, where practically 60 to 70% of the Middle East organizations are owner-driven organizations, where it is very crucial at every level the owner needs to know what's happening in. But then that becomes a very centralized approach. When it comes to your data part of it, best is to have a centralized and the decentralized both hybrid model implemented out. Because today, when employees are collecting the data, are they sharing the data for the right use, or are they stealing the data for their own purpose? So getting back on answering your question on that front, that yes, data is important for the smaller organization. Periodic audits for their applications, the data, the backups is extremely important. So it's not about how much amount of money that you can spend on the audit part, but the periodic checks and periodic audits. Just like your financials, when you are investing the amount every single month, there is a financial audit that you conduct. So even if you take a small IT audit of your own systems, that gives you a better insight that in case of a disaster, will my company have a complete outage, or will my company start running back on its phone 24 by 7 the way you have actually taken it up? So it's not about the investment part of it, but it's a policy that you have to have an audit in place.
Yes, one of the many factors facing small and medium enterprises is a reputation issue. In a world today with corporate giants, running a small to medium sized enterprise has never been harder because it's the reputational part as well. And I'm sure an outage or a data stoppage where you cannot provide a service for a certain amount of time, or where you have pledged a service and you're not able to provide it due to a system outage, does not play very well for you. So I'm guessing your solution would come in and help them, or the policies that you would implement.
Correct. So basically, in a lot of factors today, the core information which gets transported out are the emails. Now, that's where we try and tell the clients that we've got so many clients using Microsoft 365, Google Workspace. The idea is not about just keeping your data wherever that you would want in. The data that you communicate to the outside world is not only the data, but it is your company's image. Now, if the company image is saying that, fine, whenever you are communicating with the outside world, and if there is an email getting transported from your legit email ID, which you are not aware of, which means that is one area there is a gap that you need to plug in. And that's exactly where we've been helping companies to make sure that, look, whether you're storing your data into any form, emails into any form, as long as you are having your backups, you know how your data is being transported out, That's the key for all the businesses, small, big, or enterprises. They need to be aware of what exactly the data is leaving the organization and the data which is coming into the organization.
So, upon this approach, you gave us the 3 to 1 approach a bit earlier. For storing the data, what do you recommend? What are some of the best practices you can share with us?
So again, as you earlier mentioned out that you hoarded out 1.5 TB of the data. Now for the small businesses where every single month there is a kind of a cost to store the data, they do not want to have that cost as much as possible. So where what we have done is we've launched something called a zero cost private cloud. It's your data, your storage. All that we're trying to do is that we're giving you a component on top of that where you do not have to pay anything to anyone, and to make sure that the data is available wherever that you are traveling in. So in case of an issue, at least if you're working, for example, on a project from whichever industry that you are in, if you're working on a project and you've got basically uh, project stakeholders are requiring the data from different parts of the world, as long as the data is available. So when you say that a 3-to-1 policy is that you can even have, let's say, a simple 4 terabytes without having any kind of a cost, but as long as the process is followed up. So where to start off with? You need to make a first start to see what exactly is an impact on your organization. In terms of the cost front, in case of a disaster, how soon can you get back on your feet? So there is no one single procedure or a process to address the data backups. Data backups are there for a reason, and let's respect that without that particular data, if you feel that you are, if you in case of a disaster, you're okay to be without the data or your systems for 1 or 2 days, then that's something which your company's reputation and an image, how you would want to carry it forward. You can be a 10 user company which can cost you as low as just about 5,000 dirhams, but that's a kind of a one time investment. That's about it. But you know that, okay, fine, this is extremely important for my team not to knock my door that, sir, today we do not have any kind of a data or my systems have crashed.
Yeah, so the reputational damage is definitely a point. So the way I would frame it with what Mr. Raj has told us today is the question is not can I afford to spend 5,000 dirhams on data? The question is in the outage that I have, which as you mentioned, CrowdStrike, I believe, was out for about 48 hours. Is it worth the reputational damage which you will be carrying on for a few years? For me, it's a no-brainer, and I will be changing my data security, my data storage possibilities as well. Coming to data security, you said you provide a private cloud. What security measures are taken, or what security measures would you tell people to take for their data?
So what happens is before anybody accesses your data, you need to secure your network. So you need to go ahead and secure your network in a way that if it's an office that you're running, so securing your network will be as good as placing a security guard outside your office. Anybody coming in and going out needs to be scanned. Similarly, from the IT perspective, every packet moved in and out that should be tracked. Legally, even if you want to hold anybody responsible, anybody holding you responsible, any of those security measures have to be directly in place. We've had clients who've been repeat customers for us for 20 plus years. It's not about how we have changed their IT landscape. It's about how we have been able to upkeep their IT. So guaranteed that in case if something goes wrong within 1 hour, systems are back in shape. So that's exactly how we have been able to add value to the customers, saying that, look, it's not about you are giving us a support contract to make sure that your IT is being managed out, but there's a difference between managing the IT and maintaining the IT.
So, for a firm which technology today, not many people are very adept with it. You provide, or your company provides, the expertise and the data storage so the user can have basically a turnkey solution for the best practices which are to be used in the industry, correct?
Correct.
Could you give us an example where you have worked with this enterprise and given them a turnkey solution?
Yes. So basically, a few of the enterprises and the government and semi-governments who are dealing with us today, for example, banks and financial institutions, one of the biggest projects that we have done for the government is that, again, people know about Expo 2020. Practically 1.34 petabytes of data on the transcoding data was managed directly on our servers. And there were 6 months trials, POCs given to make sure the data is secured, the data is stored, and it is managed well. So that's exactly where it gives us the confidence saying that yes, I mean, when the client comes to us, we do have valid references to back it up. And at the same time, we do not rush into making a sale. We try and tell them, look, what are your expectations out of the data? If you're okay to have your systems down for a couple of days, then we have a solution. If you're not okay to have your systems down for more than 1 or 2 hours, we have a solution for that.
So it's very good to have a customizable solution. As he mentioned, if he works with governments and banks who cannot afford even a minute of outage because it's very sensitive data and it's also financial data which hackers are always hungry for.
Correct.
What are some of the data security practices you would recommend?
Again, as I mentioned, that a secure a network with having, because small businesses do not believe into investing anything into IT. The core for small businesses is that please have your firewalls in place, please have your updates in place, making sure that your 3-to-1 backup policies are taken up. So whenever the data is exposed to the outside world, what is important? Who should be able to access your data? Who should not be able to access the data? If there is any kind of an unauthorized access, set the triggers in place. That if there is any kind of a notifications taken up, set the triggers in place. What we try and give that flexibility to a lot of customers from our own data center racks that we have is that you can make sure that your data is secured. There are no power outages, there are no security outages, there are alerts and the triggers which are set in so that you do have 24/7 access to your data. And that's exactly one important takeaway should be to the small businesses, that get a bit serious about your IT. It's not about you buying a laptop or a PC or a server and everything is taken care of it. You need to have your procedures and policies in place for things to work for you.
This is especially important with globalization coming in, where even a local company can target a worldwide audience using the internet. But the internet opens another cans of worms, as Raj mentioned, so it's very important to secure our data. So, right now, when I was a student in Canada a couple of years ago, we had an instance where one of the most prominent universities in Canada, the data was being held hostage. They had basically 48 hours, if I recall correctly, to give the hackers or the people holding the data hostage what they want, or they would delete all the systems, which for a university includes transcripts, the students' financial loan details, the student details, and a lot of information that is very important to the hackers, that too for multiple years. So, how can we avoid a situation like this?
Again, the threat these days are not necessarily from external sources. You have a threat from the internal source also. So you need to be aware that what systems are your team accessing. So a typical threat of a concern at these days is the ransomware attacks. Now, ransomware attack does not come on its own. It's a user-driven activity. It's either one of your internal teams has accessed the websites, making sure that the website is safe, but it is not safe. It takes only about 10 seconds for a malware to go ahead and come into your system and say, okay, now your system is connected to the network and I'm now fully exposed. So when it comes to the ransomware attack, the major threat which is there at the moment, do I need to pay for my own data? So if you had your backups in place, then you do not need to pay for your data. But then if the data is important and if there is a gap or a negligence of not having the backups in place, then it's up to you whether you decide that should the ransomware be paid, because again it's your data. Do you want to pay for your data?
Yes, it's also
So either you take corrective measures, saying that look, fine, we will take the corrective measure, have our backups in place, so even if there's a ransomware attack, no problem, we will be able to go ahead and revert the activity. So there are a couple of clients that we've had successful recovery of complete ransomware attack data, and they did not have to pay a dime for that at all because the backup processes were in place. Moment there was an attack, the whole systems were reverted back. So yes, there are a lot of new processes available, software is available, and we try and educate ourselves so that at least the clients can benefit out of it.
So as you said, there are many other softwares and all in place. So me being a small business, what if we go to a provider like AWS or Microsoft Azure who have security measures and they have massive data farms in place? We can take a server from them. How does your company add value to that offering as well?
So what happens is that Microsoft, Google, or AWS, fantastic platforms to have, fantastic platforms to host your data on, but it's your data, so you decide because at any given point of time, any of the platform providers, they tell you that the data retention is maximum for X number of days or the period that you take up. Beyond that, what data comes in and out, they've got no authority to go ahead and say that, look, we will secure your data. Yes, we will place a security guard outside your data. What happens to your data? I mean, for example, when you mentioned AWS, when you mentioned Microsoft 365 or Azure, whatever it is. Now, today, when the data comes in, when your data is encrypted out, what happens? The encryption carries forward. So Microsoft will be protecting their platform. They cannot protect each individual tenant. Yes, they can protect the tenant, but the tenant has to understand that it is their data. So today, for example, if an employee leaves an organization and there is an intentional deletion of the data, which you come across after 90 days, Microsoft says that, I'm sorry, but the platform says that we are only giving you the security of your data for 30 to 60 days, beyond which there are a lot of processes in place. So if you can justify that process, the data is yours. Yes, to an extent you have an access to the data, but are you willing to wait for that time frame to get the data back? Because the data sizes are growing by leaps and bounds. And the last thing that people want is not having the data on the time when you require that particular data.
So based on this system, you said that you do keep up with the trends, you do keep up with the processes. With the rise of AI and other such functionalities, how do you keep up with the times and how do you offer that benefit to your clients?
So basically, the idea is that every industry, IT, non IT, whichever, regardless of every industry, undergoes a small bit of an update, upgrade, and the change. Now, if you need to really be ahead of the game, you just need to be aware of what is new in the technology, get hold of the technology, test the technology out, and then start working the impact of that technology to your clients. And that's exactly how we have been able to keep up with the trend. That what is new in the trend, how is it going to impact my clients and the new clients when they come in? Because when we onboard a new client, there are certain questions in the interview question that even we go through, because the clients need to do their own due diligence, saying that, look, are we onboarding the right partner? So regardless where what they have implemented, and as I mentioned earlier, that we are not biased towards the product or the service that you have actually gone ahead and taken in. Our job is to make sure that that aspect of simplification, that yes, whatever that you onboarded, we are there to support you out. Because again, when I'm somebody's client, but you are my client, so when you have a question raised out, when I look over my shoulder, if there's no support available, we do not go ahead and entertain that aspect, whether it is a product or a service or a principle. We do not entertain any of these three if you're not able to get the support. So to upkeep of the technology is extremely important. It could be a simple update or an upgrade, but why has the update been given? Why has the upgrade been given?
That's a very important point to consider actually, why an upgrade is given. So I was reading an article a couple of days ago. It basically said that any new technology that you have made for data security, within a few years, you will have a subsequent hacker or subsequent person who wants to steal that data who will figure out a workaround. So it's a constant battle between securing your data and people trying to take your data away. So I would always say go to a provider like Mr. Raj and Point Solutions, where it's his industry to keep on track or keep updated with all of these trends and who can secure your data best as he's an expert in his field.
Yeah, I mean, just to add up one small comment on that, that today, when you say there is an update or an upgrade, so even when, let's say, for example, there is an update to the Windows operating system or a Mac OS part of it, why does that update come in? Because again, it's a code written by a human, so element of human error cannot be omitted. So you basically have to go for a periodic check. So for example, if you have a theft in your office, so you start putting in more cameras to see that if there is a loophole, how best we could try and plug hole that. And that's exactly the same way. So updates are given, upgrades are done for a reason and for a purpose, to give you the convenience of using the technology.
And another thing that I got from your insight is also that any new feature that you try, you are working with, for example, hundreds of companies. So you will take the best practices from hundreds of companies instead of waiting for the one user where you will only secure what happens to you. So for an example is if one business in your vicinity has a theft, every business in the vicinity will install security cameras. So that is something like what you do. You take the best practices from multiple use cases and give it pre-packaged, ready-made to an end user.
Yes. So what we try and do as a matter of practice to all the customers who are into a support contract with us, we tell them that look, these are periodic updates. This is what is going to the cost impact part of it. This is how you should be laying your budgets out, so that they are made aware and they are not into assumption that fine, I've gone ahead and contracted myself with point solutions and everything will be taken care of it. No. Every time you have a person joining in, escalation of the data, get the processes in place, get the policies in place, and there's nothing to look forward beyond that.
So one of my final questions to you, Mr. Raj, is how do you prevent a ransomware attack from occurring in the first place, and how do you prevent it from reoccurring?
So yeah, that's a very good question. As I mentioned earlier, ransomware is a user driven activity. So educating your team is extremely important. That look, it's a user driven activity. Do not click on links which are not coming into you. Do not click on the links which you are not aware of. So that initial education and a periodic education to the internal team is extremely important. Now, despite the fact that we do have backups in place, how do we avoid that? Now, today people have been taking up, let's say, you've got 1.5 TB of the backups to be done, and you've finished, but you're not accumulating 1.5 TB on a daily basis. So your incremental data size is growing by whatever X amount that your company would have visualized that fine, I'm adding up 10 GB of the data, 1 GB or 2 GB or 4 GB. So what we try and do is that the methods that we adopt is that we take the full backups, secure that out, then we keep on taking the incremental backups. So the way AI has helped us out is that we go ahead and put a policy in place that for the next 10 days, there is only 1 GB coming in. Now, whenever the ransomware attack happens, it starts encrypting everything. So moment we automatically say that, okay, the threshold was 1 GB or 2 GB or 10 GB in a day. Now, all of a sudden, the threshold is cropping 10 times. We stop the backups there itself. We stop the backup there, check back, go ahead and check the applications which are being backed up, data which is being backed up. If the sizes are still the same and there is more amount of data coming in, which means there is some kind of a loophole somewhere. So that's exactly where the data is secured out. Data is backed up. We are not having any inherent data sizes coming in because your pattern, and that's exactly where I said that AI is monitoring that, okay, fine, we are kind of doing 10 GB, 10 GB, 10 GB, and all of a sudden it could grow from 10 to 12 to 13, but all of a sudden it goes to 100 GB. There is something wrong, so we just stop the blocks directly.
That's actually a very insightful solution to this problem because a hacker who is taking your data will not want just 1 day of data. They will want access to maximum data. So a 10 GB threshold growing to 12 GB is understandable. Growing to 100 GB, you will stop it right there. So even if one system of yours in your office is compromised, as you said, by a user, your backups will still be up to date and will be in pristine condition.
Correct. So we basically, once that happens, we do provide something called a PIT recovery, which stands for point in time recovery. So you as a customer can go ahead and say that, look, I mean, today we are on 10th of August, my data was corrupted out or the data was attacked by ransomware. Let me revert back onto the data for the 9th. So where we try and add up more to the backup policy and have an even day and the odd day backups. I mean, that's the age old policy defined almost 30 years back, that you can keep your data into two separate devices, one for odd day, one for even day. So in case if something goes wrong, you still have a point to revert back. So that's where we try and say that, okay, fine. Point in time recovery is that you can always revert back and say that, okay, I want data from this particular day onwards and backwards. That's about it.
And this can be customized, I believe. So
100%.
even you can even have odd even hours, for example, if someone wants access to the last hour of data versus the last day of data.
Yeah. So basically, what we do is that from some of the clients which are hosted from our data center directly, we try and take a snapshot and the block images every single hour, because that's the norm that we have signed up for, and that's the policy that we have signed up for, that every single hour there should be recordings, there should be data which has been taken up. So that way there is a real-time replication taking in place.
That is actually very useful for all the reasons you mentioned. For a small to medium enterprise, reputation is the biggest thing. Otherwise, how will you grow in the market?
Yeah.
Regardless of how good your offering is, if you do not have good data security practices, you do not have good backups, and you keep having service outages, you will not really succeed in the market. So today, this was my chat with Mr. Rajkumar Bhatia from Point Solutions. Thank you so much, Mr. Raj, for your
Thank you so
time.
much, Vedant, and it was a pleasure sharing the complete insights on how the organizations can benefit. And again, data is the next oil. Your data, it's your responsibility. It is not anybody else's responsibility.
Yes, thank you so much. If you want to contact Mr. Raj, you can contact him on his company's email address, info@pointsolutions.net, or you can go to his website, www.pointsolutions.net. Both the links will be in the description of this video. Thank you all so much for watching us for another insightful podcast. Please do not forget to subscribe to the BNI Earlybirds podcast channel and press the bell icon so you can always know when we have put a new podcast with our amazing members and our amazing guests to get valuable insights such as this. See you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.